Welcome everyone. So most of you are coming back. Most of you have joined uh, previous sessions as well. Yes, Lamin Chaudhary, I know that. And thank you so much for joining us today for on the very last day of this workshop. And yes, this is the workshop. This is the session that I know a lot of you have been waiting for. These are the kind of questions that we had been receiving even when we had started working on this workshop, like how is open science relevant to us, how it can help us, what it can do for us, and we will be delving into some of those things. So far we have been talking about making science and science processes inclusive, accessible, and open to everyone, including the societal actors. We have spent a huge amount of time in the previous sessions discussing about that. But the fact is that science is currently not open to everyone, including our own, academic community. So today we will be discussing about that as well. Like how can we make science open to our own, academic community as well. I'll be just sharing my PPT. I am your host and moderator for this workshop series. I'm India Coordinator to UNESCO Chair in Community-Based Research and Social Responsibility in Higher Education and co-founder of Open Science Outreach Network. My name is Pragya Chaube, and this was our program schedule. And by now, I hope everybody knows why we have chosen these particular topics for discussion, which are open science infrastructures, open engagement of societal actors, open dialogue with other knowledge systems, and open scientific knowledge. That is because UNESCO recommendation on open science, which is available here on this URL, and we will be sharing it with you on our chat, and it's available in 6 different languages. So please go and read it. It's available open access and it is available free. So please go ahead and read it. So this recommendation of open science, which was introduced in 2021, says that there are 4 key pillars, which are the 4 key pillars that we have used to have a deeper discourse on what is open science throughout our workshop series. And yes, we have covered a lot of things before, and today we will be discussing about open scientific knowledge. And we'll be discussing about what are these different facets of open scientific knowledge, how this benefits us, and why should we invest and adopt in open scientific knowledge. And very importantly, for those of you who attended day one of this workshop, our expert, Dr. IISc mentioned that when we are discussing about UNESCO recommendation, all the signatory countries are legally liable to follow that particular recommendation, and they need to implement those policies that adhere to that recommendation. So today we have amongst us one of our experts who would be talking specifically about that aspect. And we'll be discussing about those different things. This is how open scientific knowledge is discussed in the Open Science UNESCO framework, and they have these different verticals within open scientific knowledge, like scientific publications, open access, which is one of the problems that a lot of us know. And we are going to be discussing about open research data, open educational resources, and open hardware. So, well, I just kind of found this meme and I just thought I will share it with you. Because when everybody kind of talks about like, oh, why is open science relevant to me? But then there is this problem that all of us have faced maybe once or twice or multiple times in our lives that, okay, we want that particular information or we want to analyze that particular data, but what do we do? Because that information is behind a paywall, or that software is not available, or that data is not available. So today we will be delving into all of this. And for this, I would like to invite the very first speaker of the session, Dr. Moumita Koley. So Dr. Moumita Koley has a PhD in chemistry from IISc Austria, Vienna, and she also holds a patent in chemistry. And she is currently a researcher at DST Center for Policy Research at IISc Bangalore. She also is a consultant to International Science Council. And I know her better as the better half of Open Science South Asia Network. She is the co-founder. And yes, Moumita, please go ahead. The floor is all yours.
Yeah, thanks, Pragya, for this elaborate introduction about myself. And of course, I think that's where my and Pragya's interests matches when we founded the Open Science South Asia Network. We are also still very much trying to make that as a success to bring the people together on this particular idea of open science and bringing more awareness. Um, but today I will focus much more on the why we should do the open science, because I think you already have learned from the UNESCO recommendation framework that what is UNESCO recommending to make the science more open, accessible to everyone. And you probably also have learned about the tools that or pillars that will make science more open. But I think we can go back a little bit onto the historical perspective of system of science to understand it better, that why we should do it, because it's not something actually new, but rather we had abandoned that part, and that's why we are facing a lot of issues. For example, the issues of access. Why we are facing it, that it's important for us to understand. If we understand those nuances, then probably it would be much easier for us to embrace the openness, and we will find much easy ways to do it. And that's why I thought that it will be probably interesting for us to go back to the history and then take us towards to where we are today. This obviously the definition, I won't go into it because I think in the first day you already have learned a lot about it, but rather I will go back to the history and try to take you forward that is open science a new concept, or it was already there, or how the science system has developed. And before I go into it, let me just also make it very clear. I use the word science, it doesn't mean like few disciplines, STEM. It doesn't mean that, but rather it's a knowledge system. So it can be humanity, it can be social science, but it's the way of doing a particular knowledge, and how you verify this and what system you use is exactly what we meant by here in science. So if we try to understand that this modern way of doing science, it actually in a way was established in 17th century Europe. Before that, it was used to be really kind of a clothes science where wealthy patrons would uh, use their wealth, and some scientists, very intelligent people, will come up with using those resources. They will do experiment. They will come up with new theories. But all the knowledge was really kind of closed. For example, I don't know many if you know that how Galileo used to disseminate his discoveries. So there was competition. So what he used to do is to make some cryptic notes, send it to his peers, and try to see if anybody can decipher it. Uh, it was a very different world back then. But the thing changed um, when there was the introduction of scientific journal. Actually, that is exactly when we had the birth of open science, and from there it started this rapid increase in knowledge. The way we see science today, everything in a way started to shift from that point. The introduction of a journal. If you see here in your right hand side, this is one of the earliest journal. Philosophical Transactions of Royal Society, and this is a page from one of those early stages in 17th century. And slowly, within some time, the system became something like this. It was not anymore a closed science. People will do science, the new knowledge they would create it, and they will publish in scientific journal, which used to be run by the societies like Royal Society, as I was saying here. And this and then also there was this formal introduction of the system of peer review. So the peers will verify the knowledge to understand that if it's a verifiable, it's a proper knowledge or not. Of course, it was never been a perfect system, but this way we have developed a system of science. And that's for next 400 years till now. This is how we do science. This is our evidence-based approach to knowledge. Now, for 400 years, it was with the scientific societies. But after World War II, the situation changed drastically. So if you see a lot of public funding in science, the government started funding science. All this is kind of a post-World War II phenomenon, because during the World War II, we saw how science can help. So for example, if you would compare that, compared to World War One and World War II, lot of life was saved in World War II just because we had just because this targeted science has developed something called penicillin. And then there was the radar system. So these are the way that people realize, even the administrator realized that science is really the economic driver, and public funding should go in science. And then not just, it started a lot in US and many other countries across the world. So a more systematic approach to science and a lot more funding to science, a lot more activity in science. And that led to explosion of scientific knowledge. Now, this society-run journal system was not really enough to accommodate those knowledge, and that's when the commercial players started coming in around 1950s. And for 400 years, which was way more free and to a lot extent equitable, changed a lot, because in last 30 years, we have huge issues with subscription. Like, for example, the subscriptions is so high that we cannot access the journal. Be it an individual paper, you probably have to pay minimum $30, and the institutional subscription are also really very high. And this knowledge inequity started to creep in, and of course, researchers, the policymakers realized it. But before going to that, I would just try to highlight, this is a kind of a seminal news article in Guardian, and you can see that how much Elsevier makes as their profit margin was 36% into 2010. And it's not just that year. Many a time they make this kind of profit. And it is the scientists who actually do the research, who again writes it for them, who do the peer review. Most of the editors are also who does all this work for free. It does not happen in any other industry. Like even in, for example, Successful magazine, their authors get paid for their writing. And the profit margin is also much lesser than the scientific publishing. So looking into all this dynamics, that how that the commercial publishers are making money, whereas the researchers themselves cannot access the research that they are doing. And with that, the open access movement started. And one of the driving force behind the open access movement, or the drive for open access, came from the fact that now with the digital technology, why we need to depend on such a system which is actually pushing back science. And one of the early example of opening up of the scientific system is this preprint server archive, which physicists use. So the early dissemination of research happens through archive. And then there is something called Budapest Open Access Declaration, which was put forward that why with the digital technology, we don't have to really only depend on the publishers to do the dissemination. There is a lot of way we can make knowledge free to the society, and specifically to the fact that it is the public who funds science. So it should be accessible to everyone. And it is the introduction of the open access movement. But even after the introduction of open access movement and all this discussion from early 2000, as you say that Budapest was 2001, now if I just quickly took out the data from Web of Science, couple of days ago in March. If you see from the Web of Science data that this is the total publication in this year 2023, 2022, 2021, and only about 50% of the global knowledge is still open. Even after almost 20, 25 years of all this discussion, we have only 50% around open in the global scenario. And Indian case is even worse, because if you see that in India, it's around 30% to 30, 44, 30 or 40, sorry, 30 to 32% is kind of uh, openly accessible. And of course, this is a worrying situation. And in the next presentation, you will learn about it, what the country is doing to make the situation better. I won't go into those details on how we are trying to make the situation better, but rather I would actually try to put you uh, into this slide where we see that even that till now, probably Sci-Hub is one of our major resource for accessing. It's probably not true for premium institute of the country, let's say IISc or IITs. Sitting at IISc, we don't have issues in access, but we know that this is just like only a handful of institute in the country, and the country cannot progress that way if the majority are not included into this access. If majority does not have access to research, and still everybody is dependent on Sci-Hub. And you can see that India tops the least in access through Sci-Hub. And this can be even much more, because this data many a time is filtered in various ways. So, but we know that we are dependent on such kind of resources. Anyhow, I will now go to the next problem that we are facing. This is where, because previously we were talking about that we don't have access to resources. So there are barriers, subscription barrier. But with the discussion on open access, what has happened is that something called open access, something as known as open access or gold open access came into picture. Many of the reputed journal is now transitioning their business model to open access, that is a paid open access. So you have to pay APC to make your research article open. And that can be ranging from 2,000 to 10,000 US dollar. So for example, if, for example, this is one of the case that Nature, of course, the most reputed journal, has set up a Euro 9,500 for a single paper if you want to make it open access. So you can see that the discussion on open access, we started with a noble intention. It brought us into a place where it's become even more non-equitable. So for countries like India or the global south, really need to do something. If we don't do something, again, then we will be a situation where we were in the subscription-based model. So this is where we need to do collectively a lot, and we will discuss this in our discussion session, that what can be done. And like, for example, you can always publish a preprint, but we can talk about this in the question answer session. But rather, I will try to put your focus onto some other challenges that the science system is facing, and that's also one of the reasons that why we need to embrace open science. I'm not sure if this has been discussed before, but if you see, and maybe some of you are aware that how much fraud are coming into science. So for example, this is a front page of a book of science fiction, which was published in 2020, and the author, Professor Stuart Ritchie, actually highlighted that, and throughout the book, he highlighted so many celebrated experiments is not reproducible. This lot happens in psychology and many related psychology or fields like nutrition and all, but that doesn't mean that the other field does not have this. But in some fields, it's much more rampant, this kind of fake research. So for example, 1971, there was something called Stanford prison experiment, which is a very celebrated experiment in psychology, but nobody could replicate it. Then there was another instances in biological research. It is a paper on synthetic trachea. And that paper got a huge traction that now we can have synthetic trachea in our body. But later it was found out that that's again a fake research. And this is just kind of a tip of the iceberg. There gets such kind of stories. Some felt much more, some felt less, but overall, we are in a very, very bad situation. And also, I would like to highlight that it's not just the global research in India. Also, there is something called PubPeer, a site where researchers highlight when they find something wrong in some images in a published paper. So this is where you see that this is an image which was highlighted, that this is from a researcher from India. In his or her PhD thesis, is the PhD thesis has a lot of data falsification, and one of the paper has to be retracted because of all this falsification of data. And coincidentally, the person was actually leading the Indian COVID testing. Now, the point is that it's not to say that the person is doing some malpractices while doing this COVID testing, but you can see that if knowing this, we won't have the trust on the person. So that is specifically the problem, that we need to build a lot of trust in science, and we need to weed out all these malpractices for science. And why all this is happening is a lot to do on our research assessment or the matrices that we use. So for example, publish or perish. I'm sure everybody here knows this term, publish and perish, that we are pressurized to publish so much. Here, this is a recent paper in Nature which shows that how some countries are suddenly jumping on their publishing a lot paper. We know, for example, in India, it also has this jump, but we know that from our GRD data that funding has not increased. So how is it possible? I mean, you need to have funding in science to do the science. It cannot be just like people suddenly become superhuman. So we need to think about how it is happening. It's just probably, and that also then if we see that a lot of retraction, the right-hand side graph shows you the growth of retraction. And you see that in India also is quite in a bad place when we see the retraction growth. This is worrisome, and also I am again trying to stress this. Retraction is just the tip of iceberg, because it's only when some researchers try to find out and accidentally stumble upon the flaws, then only they highlight. And most of the time, journal don't even pay an attention, even if you raise a issue with it. So this number can be actually in reality a lot more than what we see. So of course, we need to think about what we need to do. One way, of course, to embrace open science, making data available, and I would also then put some more or such instances what's happening in the science system. We measure quality in terms of citation, but you can see that what science reported, there are so much on the citation class cartel. Then Google Scholar is also manipulatable. So if we try to kind of put so much of emphasis on certain matrices, some quantitative matter, it is not helping us in our scientific pursuits. And it's more and more it is coming out. So for example, many universities are backtracking on the university ranking, because the ranking is pushing them to pushing the researchers to do much more nasty stuff. And this is also a proof for one of the Indian dental school. This is again reported in Science, that to climb up the NIRF ranking, the college is doing a lot of nasty practices. And this has been kind of exposed by the science journalism. So we cannot tell that it's not happening. And it's just a few story. When people are doing something massive, then it gets highlighted. But underneath, there are a lot of problems that we need to solve. And one of the ways I'm saying again and again is to embracing the openness. So these are the few of those recommendation from UNESCO Open Science and recommendation framework. And we already saw that open access, why it is needed. Open data, obviously, if the data is available, the raw data is available for everyone to do the scrutiny, then anyone can anyone expert in the field can look into a paper and very easily find mistakes. And then, of course, research assessment systems need to be evaluated, re-evaluated. So publish and perish needs to go. So these are just some a snapshot, and I will stop here for now. And later on in the question and answer session, we can discuss much more. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Moumita. Thank you so much for stressing this particular point, that open science is good science. This is something that we had been trying to stress throughout our session, that it is like one, a lot of things which are happening, we need to look at this particular problem from a systems design point of view. Like when we are like talking about these shortcomings, publish and perish, and how they are actually contributing to a very, broken system, and you have put it forth very brilliantly. This is something we touched upon in our first session as well, but we did not, got into the details. So thank you for bringing this, on the forefront. And so usually we run a pre-session poll assessment, but today we actually wanted to run the poll after this particular session. And this has just two questions. So I want as many of you to participate as you can. Well, all of you can. It's just two questions, and we really want to hear your experiences and your opinions. And that is why, apart from that, I'm also going to be sharing a Google Doc link with everyone. Please share your experiences with us. Please use this Google Doc link to, let us know about your opinions and experiences on open science. And you can also use Q&A and the chat. Moumita, I think Dr. Sridhar Gautam has already put a question for you. He wants to know your thoughts on preprints. Perhaps we can take it towards the end of the session, and otherwise, please feel free to interact with the participants through the chat box and through the Q&A box. So right now, only 41% of you have actually participated in the poll. Please, I request at least 50% of you to participate. Then I will end the poll session. Mr. Dilliran Dahal, I would recommend you to please take this question in the Q&A box. Like, I'm going to give everyone 10 more seconds. And alternatively, please, you can use this Google Docs. This is something that our speakers have specifically requested us, so they can actually also understand, where you're coming from, and they can also interact with you through that Google Docs. So please use it. Okay, now we have over 60% people who have used the poll. So I'm going to end the poll over here. So, Moumita, would you like to see the poll results now?
Yes, we
Yes.
can see it so that
Yes, it's for you both, and Remya. So, yes, the first question is, how would you describe the accessibility of journal articles through your institution's library? Well, maximum people, 38% of the people say that it is generally accessible. 30% say that their institution subscribes to a wide range of journals. 14% encounter issues, and 17% report facing significant access issues. The second question was, what's the main method of accessing journal articles? 38% they access through their university library subscriptions. 26% use Sci-Hub. For 30% of them, open access, they access it through open access journals, and only 6% ask their friends and colleagues. Well, this is a very hopeful picture. Well, with this, I think I would like to invite the second speaker. So as I had discussed in the beginning, that since it is a UNESCO recommendation on open science, and all the signatory country members have to adhere to open science recommendations, and India is one of these signatories country. So to discuss more about that and to take us into, delving into details of how government is actually helping us achieve our open science ambitions and goals is Ms. Remya Haridasan with us. So Remya is currently working as a scientist in the office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. She is an electronics and communication engineer, and she did her master's in electronics with a specialization in nuclear engineering from Homi Bhabha National Institute, Mumbai. Before joining the office of PSA, she was working at Bhabha Atomic Research Center, where she was working on design and testing of control systems for nuclear power plants. And in her current role at the Office of PSA, she's working in the areas of S&T policy and governance. She's driving the One Nation, One Subscription initiative of the Government of India. As part of global engagements, she coordinated the agenda on expanding access to scholarly scientific knowledge as part of the G20 Chief Science Advisors Roundtable, organized by the Office of PSA during India's G20 presidency in 2023. She is the project coordinator for R&D projects funded by the Office of PSA in areas such as explosive detectors, energy transitions for net zero, human brain mapping, quantum technologies, high temperature materials, advanced ultra supercritical technology for thermal power plants, and more. So I have known Remya for some time now, and I know he's a brilliant person, and she's leading the Open Science initiative from the Office of PSA. So, well, it's very heartening for me to say that, well, our Open Science future lies in very safe hands. So, yes,
Thank you, Pragya, for those very kind words. And I'm glad that UNESCO gave this opportunity, and I'm really grateful to them for providing this platform where I can spread awareness about the efforts of the Government of India towards in the direction of open access, and which is also a little bit different from the approach that the other countries are taking. So I'll just share my slides now.
it's visible. It's visible.
It's visible? Yeah, fine. So a very good afternoon, everyone. Pragya already introduced me, and it's a pleasure to be here to inform you about open access in India, and in particular about the One Nation, One Subscription initiative that we have undertaken. So to give you a basic premise on which we have been taking up this initiative is the fact that open access has been acknowledged as a human right in the UN's Universal Declaration on Human Rights, where it says everyone has a right freely to share in scientific advancements and its benefits. And this was affirmed in the recent recommendation on open science by UNESCO in November 2021. And we all know that access to scholarly literature is very critical for research and also very critical in tackling the global challenges that all countries commonly face. And this was very evident in the way that access to research helped us in tackling the most recent challenge that the globe has faced together, which was the recent COVID-19 pandemic. So that is precedent to how important access to research is. So Moumita had touched upon, the evolution of scholarly publications from centuries ahead. But I'm just going to focus on how the evolution has taken place from the print era to the digital era, where in the print era, we had hard copies of journals available in libraries, and the cost of these journals were based on, how many number of copies are being printed. And access was available to anyone who had access to the libraries, the physical libraries. But as we moved on, transition to the digital era with the advent of the internet, the resources now transition from being print copies to electronic copies. But the payment structures did not see any change. The payment structures continued to be vestiges of the print era. And with the developments and advancements in technology today, the cost of having these electronic copies is nothing in comparison to what actually is being charged. And also the access is now also restricted, especially for the scholarly content. Access is now restricted to only those who can afford to subscribe to these journals, unlike earlier. So that's a change in the publishing landscape, and the two most prevalent publishing models in the digital era today are, of course, you all must be knowing about the pay-to-read model, which is about the subscription journals, where the readers pay for subscriptions, and we have the pay-to-publish model, which also Moumita touched upon as to why we started having open access journals, but then that also ended up getting commercialized to a great extent. And here in the open access journals, the payment burden shifts from the readers to the authors now. And you all must have heard about these major publishing houses, and of course are using their resources as well to read as well as to publish. So when we started this open access initiative in the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor, just to tell you, the Office of PSA, the main role of our office is to provide advice to the Cabinet and the Prime Minister on all matters relating to science and technology in the country. So we, under the leadership of the previous scientific advisor, Dr. Vijay Raghavan, Dr. K. Vijay Raghavan, we had started the Open Access Initiative, which was the first major national effort in this direction. All other efforts were, being scattered in different ministries and departments, where each of them had come in with their own policies, open access mandates and open access policies, like the Indian Council of Agricultural Research has, DST and DBT and CSIR had come out with. So these were all scattered efforts. And for the first time in 2018, it was decided that we are going to do something at the national level. So the first exercise that we undertook was the estimation of the money outflow. So as I mentioned earlier about the two major publication models, it is subscription and open access. So on the front of the subscriptions, we estimated how much India is paying for journal subscriptions. And we did a survey of all the scientific ministries and departments, because the major outgo is from the government institutions only. So all the major library consortia, whichever ministry or department they are coming under, we had done a survey. We had invited figures from them about how much they are spending annually on subscriptions. And the total estimate that we got was about 180 million US dollars, which is around 1,500 crores in rupees. So this was actually an eye-opening exercise, where we came to know that there is such massive outgo on subscriptions, yet the access is limited. So today in India, we have about 10 library consortia. They come under various ministries like the Ministry of Education, Department of Science and Technology. We have the Department of Biotechnology, Agriculture, Earth Sciences, and so on. So whatever institutions are coming under these ministries, they are able to pay for these subscriptions, and hence we have this very limited coverage. So for example, the Ishodh Sindhu Library Consortium under the Ministry of Education, it currently provides access to about 3,200 colleges in the country, 134 technical institutions, 217 universities, 98 centrally funded technical institutes, which include the IITs, NITs, IISers, IISc. However, in spite of all of this, we felt that the institutions which are currently getting access is a very small population of, is a very small fraction of the actual number of users which are there in the country. So we have the IITs, NITs, IISers, say just about 10% of the student population in the country goes there. The rest is in our tier 2 and tier 3 educational institutions, who, I mean, many of whom are not able to get access because they are not able to pay for subscriptions. The second estimation was on the side of open access publishing, which has now become highly commercialized, where authors have to pay very hefty sums, as Moumita had pointed out, to the tune of, I guess, some 9,000 euros for some a nature paper. So I would like to quote here a study which was done, a paper which was published way back in 2017. That's the old, latest published paper which has done an analysis on the APCs. There was another recent publication, but there was some contention in the figures, so I'm using the one before that, published before that. So it was analyzed that in the paper that the APCs are paid by authors from mostly from the research grants, and APCs range of APCs paid by Indian authors. They are ranging from USD $7.5 to $5,000. And the average APC paid by Indian authors was to the tune of $1,631, which is close to 1 lakh per paper. And the annual expenditure on APCs between the period 2010 to 14 was around 13 crores, which is $2.4 million, and about $8.8 million in the period from 2015 to 2019, which is close to 60 crores. And APCs, they do place a huge burden on the research grant which the researchers receive. So that money, if the APCs could have been nominalized to a more affordable range, that money could have been used for doing useful research as well. So this was another estimate for us to work upon. So when we also, profits made by publishers, even Moumita had touched earlier. Here, I would just like to cite a report by WIPO in 2019, which just gives an idea about the global book publishing industry, which generated a revenue of about $64.1 billion in 2019. And this is a country-wise survey figures which were given in that paper. So the premise which we are talking about here is the fact that when the peer review is being done by academics, which is mostly for free, then the technical backend for the distribution of electronic papers in today's advanced digital age is not expensive anymore. The costs which are being charged by publishers is not justified. And the this huge profit-making potential of this industry has also led to the mushrooming of predatory journals, which would publish anything for money, and it is highly detrimental to the entire research enterprise. Then we also did a survey of the global open access movements, which have been ongoing for over 2 decades now. Some are more recent. Just to quote a few, we have the Coalition S, which is the coalition of European research funders, which have come out with the Plan S, which is their research, which is their strategy for negotiations with publishers for a gradual transition to complete open access, where you must have heard that journals are now flipping gradually to open access and giving target timelines when they are planning to completely flip to fully open access. And we have the OA 2020 initiative. It's a global effort coordinated by the Max Planck Digital Library with participation of research organizations from across the world. And their aim is to achieve open access with costs which are more transparent and economically sustainable. That is a very important part of their mission. And other efforts in Latin American countries, where we have seen the development of the diamond open access model, where there are it's a model where there are no APCs, and it is a completely community driven, scholars driven initiative where they use public funds to support such a model of publishing where there are no payments for publishing or for reading. Then we heard about the example of the University of California, Berkeley, which negotiated landmark open access deals with Elsevier, where a single cost control contract covering subscriptions as well as APCs was also arrived at. So this was all sort of like a motivation for us to start doing something for India also at a national level. So the unique publishing landscape in India is something like the cost of the publications, the cost for publishing is mostly borne by the government, where the subscriptions, the charges are paid by consortia, and consortia are supported by ministries and departments, which ultimately get money from the center. And the APCs are again paid from the research grants, which again are provided by government funding agencies. So this gave the government a lot of what I would say a great opportunity to consolidate everything at one place, and because much of the outflow was from the government itself. So if I could list down the 5 key problems with the publishing industry is, right now we say that we feel that the legacy payment structures from the print era still exist, which should not be the case. There is massive outlay for the subscriptions, but the access is still very restricted. And we have also observed that the resources which are subscribed by multiple consortia have a lot of commonality. So there is, also a fear that, you are ending up paying multiple times for the same resource. Then exorbitant APCs, which is something which, is a major cause of concern worldwide. So when we identified the problems, did the survey globally, we did a survey in-house in the country. We came up with a 3-pronged approach, which comprised the vision for open access in India, starting with the first step on One Nation, One Subscription, where which is a more immediate kind of initiative that we are planning, which is about consolidating subscriptions, consolidating consortia all across the country. And its features I will touch upon in the coming slides. The second track will be about promoting Indian journals and repositories as well to increase the visibility and access of Indian research, which is more of a short-term goal. And finally, the third track, which we feel is very important in supporting the progress of the first and the second tracks, is the new research evaluation methods, where research evaluation needs to be done in a more journal independent manner. So so as to somehow reduce this culture of publish or perish, because your evaluations are also depending on the number of papers that you are publishing. So somehow if that focus is removed from journals, like scientists can now focus on other things also to get evaluated as good scientists, that will also help in our efforts in the other 2 tracks. So when I talk about One Nation, One Subscription, the whole idea is to consolidate all the payments for subscriptions to publishers through a central agency. So for the subscription journals, what we have planned is a centrally negotiated and centrally funded national subscription, and access will be provided to all individuals in the country, and specifically we mean all individuals who need it. And here what I'm trying to say is that it's not, what we are envisioning is not that every PC will be able to, somebody from every PC will be, every laptop, every PC will be able to get access. No, that's not the plan, because something like that will not be economically feasible also for the country to support. But what we are planning is something that we had done in the print era, where all the reading material was available in a library, and people who really needed it, they used to go to a library and access it. So our plan is to provide access to public infrastructure like public libraries, where such any user who actually needs access to such papers can go to the library and access it. Then on the front of APCs also, we are planning to work with publishers to get more concessions on APCs for Indian authors. And also there's a plan to have a consolidated fund to support APCs for select good quality journals, good quality open access journals, so that our scientists also do not get snatched away from the opportunity of publishing in high quality journals just because they are not able to pay for them. Because higher quality of the journal also many at times coincides with higher APC charges as well. So as far as the implementation plan is concerned for ONOS, we have planned to implement it in phases, where in the first phase, we will be consolidating all the government academic and R&D institutions under the national subscription first, because it's the lowest hanging fruit for the government to take an immediate action. And so as part of this, all institutions which are currently part of consortia will come together, and also government institutions which have not been able to afford subscriptions will be able to get the benefits. And in phase 2, which we are planning will be probably after 3 or 4 years, we will move on to universal access, also gauging from the experience of the phase 1, which will help us in strategizing for phase 2. And the target date of commencement as of now is 1st of January 2025. So the benefits of ONOS phase 1, we are planning to expand access from currently 2,400 institutions, which are subscribing, to about 6,500 government funded institutions, which will include about 5,000 odd government colleges, which will now be able to get the benefits as well. Then in the earlier model of subscriptions, if you see, or in the current model of subscriptions, if you see, I'm already in ONOS in 2025 next year, sorry. So in the current model, how it is that consortia are only subscribing to resources of their interest, of their disciplines. But the plan under ONOS is that every user will be able to access content from all disciplines. And what we are trying to work out with publishers is also to get access to their full collection of journals and not specific discipline specific collection of journals. So one is that the full collection of journals from every publisher will be available, and every user in the consortium will be able to access every resource. So it's quite an ambitious plan, and we are working towards it very intensely. And APC charges also will be addressed, as I had mentioned, through concessions and separate consolidated government fund for this. And on the front of promotion of Indian journals and repositories, now this is also a little bit futuristic, but we do really want to have a family of high quality, good Indian journals, where a very high quality peer review is ensured, and it covers all streams of sciences and humanities. So authors can now publish in reputed Indian journals of global visibility, our authors or authors worldwide. So that's the plan, because we do have some really good Indian journals even now, like the journals published by the Indian Journal of Medical Research. We have journals published by the Council of Agricultural Research, Current Science. So the plan is to promote such journals to really improve their quality. That's the main focus. And in terms of repositories, I mean, there is the government has acknowledged the importance of having repositories populated. So the plan is to create, revive, promote national and institutional repositories, and also at the global level, linking of national repositories with international repositories is also being worked on. And on the front of new research evaluation methods, what we are proposing is evaluation methodologies which are more focused on intrinsic merit and the impact of the work rather than the venue of publication. This will also encourage scientists to ensure quality in their work rather than just running after journal publications. And this will also help to promote our Indian journals as an additional good quality publishing platforms for Indian authors, because that pressure will not be there that, you have to have a number of publications in certain, impact factor journals having certain impact factor greater than a certain level. Then the weightage also is to be assigned to parameters such as innovation, entrepreneurial capabilities. That is also, we are trying to come up with a framework which incorporates these, which considers these qualities as well. So overall, if you see the plan for open access and ONOS initiative being an integral part of it, is aimed at the final outcome, which is to bring global best knowledge and scholarship to the last mile in the country at negligible or reasonable cost. This aligns with our vision for the National Education Policy 2020, where there is a huge focus on interdisciplinary research. So as I mentioned earlier, now that we have when we have our researchers getting access to journals from all disciplines, that will provide them with the tools to, the means to start working more on interdisciplinary research. And of course, with the vision of the not proposed anymore, sorry, that's a typo there. The Ansandhan National Research Foundation, which is already in place. The vision of, promoting a research culture in tier 2 and tier 3 institutions as well, tier 2, tier 3 higher education institutions as well in the country, that we will be able to achieve through ONOS, where now we have opened the access or expanded access to so many more institutions. Then our office had also discussed this agenda on synergizing global efforts to expand access to scholarly scientific knowledge, even in the G20 discussions, where the G20 Chief Science Advisors Roundtable, which was initiated by our office in India's G20 presidency last year, this item was discussed, and we received support, unanimous support from all countries, all G20 countries. We've all committed to work together on this further. So if I can just read the main commitments or the main points which were highlighted in the discussions in G20, was the importance of evolving alternative approaches to providing immediate and free access to appropriate publicly funded research publications. And the Indian initiative is actually one such approach that is different from what is being followed elsewhere. Then we recommend establishing interoperability standards that would allow interlinking among various national as well as international repositories to expand access to publicly funded research. And finally, we acknowledge that the frameworks for research assessment and evaluation should take into consideration holistic contribution of research outputs, including both their intrinsic merit as well as the broader impact. So with this, I conclude my presentation, and I hope this was useful to all of you. I'll just stop sharing now.
Well, certainly very useful, Remya. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking out time from your busy schedule and coming here for this great presentation. And I mean, while you were going through the presentation, I could actually see that a lot of people were just solely focused, very quietly, like listening. And as you can see from the chats right now, everybody was very interested in hearing more from you. For me personally, I found it very useful. Some of the numbers, some of the figures that you presented were quite eye-opening, and I'm very glad that Government of India is taking these, very concrete steps to address our problems. So we are already slightly above time, so I will quickly just take the couple of questions that were there. Thank you so much, Moumita. I can see Moumita has been constantly engaging with the audience. Thank you. So one of the questions that came while you were discussing, Remya, was basically from Ishita Puri. Since publishing charges are currently paid using research grants, what role can funding organizations play in promoting open access? So I think Moumita has already provided some answer, but like I would like both of you to weigh in and put forth your opinion. I'll begin with you, Ramya.
Yeah, so definitely government has also realized that the trend towards open access is quite is picking up a lot of momentum. And we also realize that maybe separate funds need to be allocated for specifically for publishing in the research grants, so that the researchers don't have to take out whatever is there left in the research grants to the publication. So I mean, substantial money to be given for the purpose of publication specifically needs to be given. So that's something that we are working on.
Great. Moumita, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, so I will again highlight that, I mean, we have been kind of slaves to publisher for quite a long time. So I will be a little radical in that sense, that saying still we should not really be always holding on to that that's the only way. But of course, that's one of the way, because we cannot again say that we don't have an alternate infrastructure to ditch the publisher altogether.
Yeah.
So, but my submission here, which I wrote into the chat as well, we should play hard on the purchasing power parity kind of uh, argument, that if somebody in Europe or US is paying 10,000, looking into our purchasing power parity, it should really adjust it to those numbers. Also, the research intensity. So, for example, what is our GRD and how much we spend? So, based on that, this should be kind of calculated for countries. It cannot be like an upper cap and ask for anything and pressurizing the author, and just in the name of those let's say reputation, which is the selling point, which is a very different market than any other market. Here the one which is the consumers are really at the end, where we have to we have to do everything what the sellers are doing. So again, apart from being radical on the side of being rational, I would say that we need to look into the purchasing power parity and GRD while doing such kind of negotiation. We cannot go with what publishers will be asking.
So at the government level, we have interacted with the G20 countries also, and many of them are considering development of frameworks for affordable publishing. So that also is one of the points that we would also like to collaborate globally with countries and take a united effort, because that's the only way to build pressure on publishers, when countries come together and take a united stand. That's why I think the G20 platform has been very useful in getting a lot of global traction, also focused onto this effort.
That's great. And building on what Moumita you were saying, I mean to say, I know this question is particularly about open access, but we've had similar experience when we were discussing about open infrastructures, even for digital infrastructures and repositories. Sometimes we have to pay for the DOIs and everything, and they are being managed by the West. So when they are actually reaching out to us with that you should be using our services, we have to pay the amount which is basically not feasible for a developing country. So this is a very pertinent problem in this entire ecosystem, that you have raised a very important point, that it should be according to the country's purchasing power. They cannot be just pushing out their own agenda and just
It also one question on science diplomacy, and as you have highlighted, this is again the same thing, because in the infrastructure, let's say for those kind of infrastructure like DOIs, we again have to, this is where science diplomacy can play a role. Again, the global south countries, like even like the LATAM, Canada, we should all come together to do this kind of negotiation on the DOIs. Our research should be visible. So why not to kind of build an infrastructure where we also have a say on what should be the cost or price or whatever. And also, we also have to understand that there is a lot of geopolitics plays around, because I know that with the DOI model, certain countries which is under embargoed by US or Europe, then they cannot even take part into those initiatives. So the point that is that there's a lot to be done, and it has to be done. This is something which has to be top down, because researchers cannot can highlight the issues, can tell what can be done, but it has to be. So that's what Ramya they are doing. The office is doing a lot, and she already told. So this is another point that probably they can also look into, how to have the infrastructure accessible to us.
Right. So just one question. This is from Delhi Randhal. I would like to rephrase this question slightly. So Moumita, you had been discussing about retraction and the research fraud. So I would like to put this question to both of you. Like, are there institutional manners or there could be policy frameworks how through which we can address this rising, this very alarming trend that we are seeing in India on these, this research fraud and this retraction trend?
Yeah, I will start with it, then I will hand it over to Ramya to say that what government can be doing. So, one thing that we are really at a very stage where we just started to learn about all this. We need to raise a lot of awareness
Exactly.
about the ethics of science.
Mm.
It's very important. This is a point which is very important, that ethics and integrity should be kind of this. We need to do a lot of webinars, and also we also need to understand that the ethics in publishing. So, for example, we are seeing this trend. Let's say an editor or chief of a journal is publishing in the same journal. If it is an editorial piece, it's not a problem. It should not be a research article. And then editorial board members publishing in a lot into those journals, and these kind of things are against the ethics of science or scientific publishing. So there are ethical guidelines. All this needs to be highlighted, not just to the researchers but to the university VCs. We have a lot of universities, private universities, where these knowledges are not kind of, people don't know all this. So this is what we have to do. There is no other way. Awareness will make people follow the right path. But then, of course, we can do some things. But I would definitely request Ramya to ponder a little more on it and share her thought that how this can be taken forward. From OSAN side, of course, will be happy to do something. But of course, we would like to know what can be done from your side, from government side.
So, thanks, Moumita. I completely agree with you that awareness is very key here in informing people about research ethics, what is integrity in doing research and all. And see, it might seem that the government is silent in all of this, but we are taking note of the developments, we are taking note of the trends. But right now, I think what we are trying to do is analyze what is happening in the ecosystem and how it is impacting. So we have definitely taken note of this. We are aware of this. In fact, I'm working with the Moumita in the sense of the earlier paper that I had mentioned about that APC publishing costs, that paper which came, and Moumita's team was the one which flagged us that this is there's some discrepancies in the paper. And also I think she is part of other efforts like the retraction watchdog and all of that. So we are in touch, we are taking note of these things, and we would definitely welcome any suggestions what the government can do in this regard. And spreading awareness, yes, definitely we are working closely with the Ministry of Education. We're working very closely with all scientific departments, and our office is in a position to come up with a framework together with all the stakeholders. So we are open to suggestions on how to go about this.
And Moumita, I believe you have recently initiated a project to address awareness on research fraud as well. Would you like to say something about that?
Well, it's actually in a so what we are currently trying is to make a retraction watch dashboard. so that we can track what is happening in terms of retraction. But then again, it's like it's only the data that will be provided by Retraction Watch. Whereas the other side, we are trying to come up with some innovative ways for incentivizing people to show that in research paper, if there are some data fraud, some malpractices, all this has been happening, then people can report. So we are again prepared one kind of a website. We will soon be launching it. And again, it's please everyone just try to understand. It's not at all to make someone feel bad or something like that. It's about cleaning up the system. Many a time we do things unknowingly. So for example, plagiarism, we don't really know the definition of plagiarism. What will be a plagiarized paper? Sometimes we just rephrase and we think it's just in the introduction. We think it might not be a bad idea, but maybe it's not a good idea because that will also be flagged as plagiarism. So it's way more important to make people aware. All these are on the awareness level. It's not at all to accuse anyone. This is something very, very clearly I would like to mention. No, it's not about accusing, it's about awareness building, making the learning better.
Great. So we are already 50 minutes over. So I think it's a good time to end this session and end this entire workshop. And thank you so much to our very fabulous experts and speakers today. And can I request everyone on the panel to just turn on their camera for a second so we can just take one of the saying bye picture. And to our wonderful participants and audience, thank you so much because you made this entire session very interesting for us as well. We had like amazing interactions throughout this entire workshop series, and it was a lot of learning experience for us as well. This was the very first time we are running such workshop, and yes, we will be running these more of such workshops on open science, and yes, all the material would be put on on YouTube, on our social media. So yes, you will be able to access all of that, and everybody who is asking about e-certificates would be provided to you early next week. And since this was our first time, yes, we do not have a poll today, but we do have a Google form where we are asking for your feedback because your feedback would actually help us prepare well for the future sessions. So please, I request all of you to participate. You will be getting this, feedback form in your emails as well when you are leaving the session too. So yes, please make sure that you fill it, and that would be very useful for us. My colleague Dr. Ruchika is here. Ruchika, would you please be kind enough to take a picture for us? Thank you so much.
Definitely, I'm going to take a picture for all of you. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Smile. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Workshop. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm muting myself. Thank you so much. And with this, I would end the workshop and I would end the session. Thank you everyone who joined us today, and thank you to our amazing, amazing speakers.